Are you an enterprise seller? And on paper, things look pretty good. From the outside, people would be like, what do you have to complain about? Everything looks amazing. But on the inside, you feel kind of like a disaster. You might feel like maybe people are going to find you out as a fraud. Maybe they're going to find out that you just got lucky and you shouldn't be where you should be. Maybe they're going to find out that your list of achievements isn't as good as it looks on the outside. If this is you, it's called imposter syndrome, and you are in such good company. Nice to meet you. My name is Amber. I'm a performance coach, and I specifically help enterprise and strategic account executives who are in tech sales with their mindset and their productivity so that they can feel so much more confident and get out of their own way. I've worked with hundreds of tech sellers, and recently I polled my audience to find out what their biggest problem was, and surprise, surprise, it was imposter syndrome. So today we're going to get rid of imposter syndrome once and for all. We're going to obliterate it so you don't have to worry about it anymore. So here's what we're going to cover. First of all, we're going to talk about the 3 flavors of imposter syndrome so you can figure out which one is yours. Next, we're going to talk about why feeling like an imposter can actually mean that you're on the right track. And then stick around for the end because I'm going to give you a powerful analogy of how imposter syndrome is a lot like muscle soreness after a good workout. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for that analogy because it's going to completely reframe the way that you think about imposter syndrome. Okay, let's dive right in. I'm going to tell you the 3 flavors of imposter syndrome. Maybe you have one of them, maybe you have all 3. If you do, don't worry, I've got you covered. Let's get going. So the first flavor of imposter syndrome is feeling like a fraud. You feel like you have no idea what you're doing. People are going to find you out. At any moment, the imposter syndrome police will come in and say, we found you out. You're making all of this up. You don't know what you're doing. And you feel like it's only a matter of time before you're found out. I'd love to know in the comments, is this what you feel? Tell me what your number 1 flavor is. The second flavor of imposter syndrome is feeling like you just got lucky. You were just in the right place at the right time. The people who put you in this position didn't know what they were doing. They were temporarily incompetent and they didn't realize that you were not qualified for this job. Is this you? Drop a note in the comments to let me know. And the third flavor of imposter syndrome is downplaying all your achievements. Sure, on paper, things look pretty good, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. You're nothing special. You're not anything more extraordinary than anybody else, and anybody could have done what you did. When other people look at your achievements on paper, they're like, whoa, you did all this? This is amazing. But on the inside, you're like, if you knew the whole story, you wouldn't think it was that cool. If any of these 3 flavors or all of these 3 flavors resonate with you, don't worry, you're not alone. And it definitely doesn't mean that you're unqualified. Usually what this means is that you're someone who is bound and determined to grow. You love growth and you love pushing yourself. So why am I telling you all this? Well, the first step is acknowledging imposter syndrome and noticing how it shows up for you. Once you've done that, you can take the next steps towards obliterating it. So next, let's talk about why imposter syndrome is actually a good thing, especially in the high-paced environment of tech sales. So first of all, if you feel imposter syndrome, that is a sign that you are a wild success. You cannot feel imposter syndrome and not have achieved some kind of big success. You only feel imposter syndrome when you're in a growth phase. It's when you got your next promotion, when you got a new project, you've got a bigger deal, you're signing bigger clients than you have ever before. Maybe it's a new sales cycle. That's when imposter syndrome shows up. Imposter syndrome is just a temporary result of growth. It's just a signal that you're somebody who likes to push yourself. The opposite of imposter syndrome is complacency. If you don't ever feel imposter syndrome, it's because you're not growing in your career. So I had a couple that I met where the woman had imposter syndrome so much, the wife did. And the husband, he didn't have any imposter syndrome. And he couldn't believe why she had so much imposter syndrome. Well, she had recently joined a new company, gone into a leadership role, and was in a new industry that she'd never been in before. Meanwhile, he had been at the same job for 9 years in the same position. So he had no imposter syndrome because he wasn't growing. He was doing the same thing day in and day out. And there wasn't any of that growth versus his wife, who was growing intensely. Now, the thing about imposter syndrome is that it's temporary. And I know for some of you, you're going to say, no, for my whole career, I felt like an imposter. And if that's the case for you, then I know that you are somebody who's had hockey stick growth. You've probably grown much more quickly in your career than your peers have. What I want you to notice about imposter syndrome is that whenever you feel imposter syndrome, it's about a different thing every time. You probably used to feel like an imposter when you were doing outbound, when you were cold calling or sending outbound emails. And now you've done it hundreds of times and you don't feel like an imposter about that anymore. Remember the first times you did a demo or the first times you did discovery calls and how uncomfortable and impostery that felt. And now you've done it so many times, you don't even really have to think about it. So whatever the thing is that you feel like an imposter about now, it will inevitably stop feeling uncomfortable the more that you do it. You just have to keep doing it over and over and over again to teach yourself that you can do it. And then you'll no longer feel like an imposter about that anymore. So notice that even if you've had imposter syndrome and through your whole entire career, it's been about different things. And it's just the result of acquiring new skills. Once you've learned that skill and put in the repetitions, you no longer feel like an imposter with that anymore. So I promised you an analogy that's going to completely reframe the way you think about imposter syndrome. But first, I want to talk about this growth phase and how sometimes it's okay to rest. So when I notice that I'm feeling imposter syndrome, I remind myself, I'm somebody who likes to grow, and this is just a sign of growth. Also, it's temporary. But there are definitely times in my life where I'm in a busy season of life and I don't really want to feel the growth in my career. So maybe I've got a lot of chaos, it's feeling very hectic, or maybe I just came out of a really big growth zone and I start to feel that tinge of imposter syndrome and I ask myself, is this a good time for me to grow? Is this a good time for me to lean in and really experience these feelings? And if it's not, then I just pause it and I say, okay, it's just as important to rest in growth as it is to push yourself and grow. I think about professional athletes. They have specific plans of how they're going to rest. If they were to work out all day, every day, they would get injured, they'd get burned out, and they wouldn't be able to grow like they want to. They have to rest in order to be successful. And it's the same for enterprise tech sales. You have to be very strategic about the times when you give yourself the rest to recover from what you've been doing so that you can experience your next level of growth. So it's really helpful to notice if you're the kind of person who needs that rest right now, or if you're ready to go and fired up and ready for your next level of growth. Okay, let's bring this home with the analogy that I promised. So imagine that you're at a gym. You do a new kind of workout. After the workout, you go home and your muscles feel sore. The soreness in your muscles is the result of growth. It's the natural discomfort that happens from growth. But what's really interesting is that when we feel this physical soreness after exercise, we tell ourselves, oh, it's working. Now, I would argue that imposter syndrome is the mental discomfort that is a result from growth. It's the natural discomfort that comes along mentally when you're growing. However, instead of telling ourselves, oh, it's working, we tell ourselves, I'm not cut out for this. This is a sign that I'm not supposed to be here. This is a sign that I'm not good enough. And I want you to think about your imposter syndrome the same way as you think about sore muscles. It's something that is the natural result of growth, and it's a sign that you're growing. It's also not going to last forever. You can take really good care of yourself. You can drink more, hydrate more, have more protein, and that soreness is going to go away. Same thing as when you're learning new skills. Take good care of yourself, get extra sleep, get extra rest, put in the repetitions, and pretty soon that discomfort is going to go away. So when I think about imposter syndrome, it's something that I know is going to always exist, and it's totally fine. It's just the natural result of growth. And it's a phase. It's inevitable that it's going to end as I build my skills and become more confident in whatever it is that I'm learning. So when you feel imposter syndrome, just know that you're in your sweet spot. You're the kind of person who loves to grow, and this is just a sign of growth. Here are some key tactics that you can use to make sure that imposter syndrome is not something that weighs you down. It's just something that exists. You notice it, but it doesn't have any meaning for you. First of all, recognize how it shows up for you. Are you the fraud? Are you the person who just got lucky? Do you downplay all your achievements? Maybe one of those is stronger than the other, and you can notice which one it is for you, or maybe all three of those, and just start to notice when it comes up. Start to notice when you're telling yourself that you just got lucky and you shouldn't be in this position. Start to notice when you're downplaying your achievements. Start to notice when you feel like a fraud and people are going to find you out, which, by the way, of course you feel like you don't know what you're doing because you don't know what you're doing. Anybody who was ever in your position also didn't know what they were doing. They just kept going until they figured it out. And you are very good at figuring it out. You're going to do that too. Second, reframe the idea that I'm not cut out for this, and instead tell yourself that this is a sign of growth. It's temporary. It's not going to last. All I have to do is just learn this new skill, and then I'm going to feel totally comfortable with it. Remind yourself that imposter syndrome is just a sign of growth. You cannot experience imposter syndrome unless you've attained your next level of success. Next, be strategic about your rest. Know when it's a good time for you to push, and know when it's a good time for you to relax. The rest is just as important as the work time. And lastly, Celebrate your wins. Whether it's big or small, make sure that you're giving yourself a celebration. It teaches your brain that the things that you're doing and the effort that you're putting in is really good. It's being rewarded by a celebration, and it's going to make you want to do it more. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what flavor of imposter syndrome you experienced, and I'd love to hear what was most helpful for you in this video. Please drop your comments below so I can see, because chances are you are not the only one who feels imposter syndrome, and you'll see that when you see the comments. If you want more help with your imposter syndrome, I've got a free guide for you specifically for enterprise tech sellers. Check out the link in the description to get that guide. And if you want help, I will work with you one-on-one. We'll coach you through it. We'll clean up all your mindset garbage and get you well on your way. I've helped hundreds of tech sellers, and some of them have gone on to make 7 figures as a W-2 employee. That's absolutely possible for you as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this valuable, feel free to like and subscribe, and you can tune in for more strategies that will help you accelerate your enterprise tech sales career. Remember that imposter syndrome is not a sign of failure. It's just a sign of growth, and it's a sign that you are a wild success. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.